I was sitting there practically all day, all morning, trying to think about and work through what I want to share with you and what would be the starting point or the introduction to what I want to share. When I was 16, which is not that long ago, my cousin got murdered, and that had a profound impact on my life. I didn't know how to deal with his death. So like a lot of, I guess, Indigenous people, we turned to drugs and alcohol. And I was in that lifestyle for about 3 years until one day where I was drinking all day at a pub up in the Port Stephens area. And I got converted, and then I moved from there to Adelaide and then went to college, and that's where Kaylin chased me all around the paddock. And then once we got married, we moved to Melbourne, and it was down in Melbourne that things started to, I'm not sure whether we can use the word unravel, but things started to happen, in my life. My dad, or at least my parents, were living in Eden on the far south coast, and we would normally go up there for holidays. And it was during this particular weekend that, like any other weekend, we were at church, and the call came that somebody was missing. And somebody that was missing was a very influential person in our life, because we sat under his tutelage at Bible college, and well known right across Australia. And the call came that he was missing. And so panic set in the church, and I'm not sure whether we had church, but we dispersed and went everywhere looking for him. And because he was like fishing, we all went along the coast and the rivers singing out up until midnight. So we got up early the next day. It was arranged that we would all disperse right throughout Eden. And if you've ever been to Eden, Eden's a very hilly place. And so I was walking along one of the ridges, and the call came that we found him. And so up on the ridge, I ran down the hill as fast as I can, like those people that run down the hill chasing the cheese. It was a bit like that, and I was nearly falling over. And when I got down to the bottom, there was the pastor, a friend, my dad and his brother that were sitting around. And when they sang out that they found him, as I was running down, two things crossed my mind: that he was either drunk or he was down there naked, and I couldn't work out which. But when I got down to the bottom, it was the biggest shock, the biggest surprise. Found him hanging. But it was difficult because the position that he was in, it was like he was in a praying position, where the rope was around his neck, but he was in a sort of a kneeling kind of position and just a little bit off the ground. And I still wonder even to this day how, he could have come to that point or that position. And so I didn't know how to react. Shock, horror, and I looked around at all the guys that were there, and they were just sitting there dumbfounded, not quite realising or at least coming to terms with what had happened, because he was well liked within the Eden Church, like I said, and right throughout Australia. It was well known. And so I'm not quite sure why I did this, but I went over and I bent down, almost in a kneeling position, and I looked right into his black eyes. And all of a sudden, such anger, just I could feel it welling up inside, and I just wanted to lash out and punch him so many times, saying, why, why? Don't you realise that there are a lot of people that loved you and respected you and cared for you and would have helped you in any way possible? And so it was arranged that his family come to Sydney, and I went to Sydney, me and my uncle, to pick him up and bring him down. And that was a difficult time, to say the least. And so we went back to Melbourne, where we were living and ministering, and I didn't realise the things that were happening in my life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't study. I went to a counsellor. Actually, I went to my uncle, who was in Melbourne at the time, and I was telling him the situation, and he said, it sounds like you're going through depression. And so he arranged for me to have counselling sessions with supposedly one of the best counsellors in the state. And so he makes an appointment. I go along, and he puts a chair opposite to where I was sitting, and he says, just talk to the guy like he was there and ask him a series of questions, why did you do this, and all these kinds of stuff. And I'm sitting there looking at this empty chair while he's there just sort of, waiting for me to ask these questions. And I said, mate, I can't do that. I feel so stupid. I know that nobody is there, and you want me to talk to an empty chair. He said, look, just pretend that he's there, and what would you like to say to him? So I said something, but I felt so stupid. And so I didn't go back. I think I went back twice, but I wouldn't go back after that because, he gave me these tablets, and the tablets were making me sleep. And I can't afford to sleep because I was going to college at the time, and all my kids was young, and I had to pick them up, drop them off at school and pick them up after school. And Kaylin, of course, didn't have any licence at that time, so I got off the tablets because they were like sending me zombie-like. And so I couldn't sleep, I couldn't concentrate. I was a bit afraid to go out on the roads in case, my mind wandered and I would cause an accident or even, myself. But the depression didn't get better, it got worse. And so I wasn't functioning all that well. So I left there, and we went up to Port Stephens, working on the oysters for about 3 months. And I come home from work. Work was good because it took my mind off, the whole situation. But I'd come home and I'd lock myself in the room, and Kaylin would just bring a plate of food in like an animal in a cage, and just leave the food at the door. And that was my lifestyle or activity, or whatever you want to call it, for the next couple of months. My auntie had come up, my mum's older sister, Auntie Lena. Auntie Lena. She came up and she prayed with Kaylin every day for a week. And I didn't notice any changes that were happening. And the one thing that was recurring in my mind all over and over and over is that maybe he had the right idea. Maybe, that's the only way out of the depression and out of the situation that I was going through, was to follow his example. And I just couldn't get that out of my mind for a long while. Maybe he had the right example. And I thought that suicide was the right thing to do, the best thing to do, the only thing to do. And it was a really torrid time. And it lasted for about 2 years in my life. And when I came out of it, and I didn't know I come out of it, because where we were staying was opposite the swimming bars, salt water swimming bars, where we used to swim when we were kids. And I was diving. There that I ended up going to college, and it's when I finished college, I didn't know where to go. They offered me, you can go anywhere in Australia to do work, do ministry. I didn't know about Mount Druitt. I never heard of Mount Druitt in all my life, but God led me here to Mount Druitt. And I tell you, in all honesty, there is some lovely people here in Mount Druitt. And I want to thank you for, accepting me as your own, at least one of your own. And so it's been quite a journey. But depression and suicide, and over the course of time, we've come across people who've lost family members to that dreaded disease and to that kind of situation. And it hasn't been easy, hasn't been pleasant. But I think God allows you to go through those kinds of things that you may be able to help others, who are going through it. Because I remember one evening we had this white boy. He come to the house. He's from. He had a Catholic upbringing, and he was going through depression. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. I could identify with the feelings that he was going through, and he looked at me rather strangely, as if, this black fella don't know what he's talking about. But I knew exactly where he was coming from, and I was able to help him and talk to him and give him a bit of guidance in regards to depression. So Kayleen, well, I'll let her tell her story, and her story is about knowing how to help somebody that's going through those kind of processes.
Well, hi, well, that's not easy listening to that. I had my own trauma. I lost my mum when I was 9, turning 10. She went missing at sea. She was part of the stolen generation as well as her parents. So I felt like I was somebody who was already traumatised, trying to look after somebody who's been traumatised. So, but at the same time, I think having dealt with my own trauma gave me the strength to look after somebody who was traumatised. And I don't think I would have been able to do that if I didn't go through all that trauma myself. And I'd just like to let you know, that I had to go through my own healing of, my mum gone missing, taken off to the community with my other family members. But no one sort of really got beside you to, back then, you didn't have a counselling session on how to get over things, It's something that you had to do yourself. And so as a 9-year-old, I think I healed myself. And I used to go and cry in the shower for my mum when I was 9, when nobody could see me, in secret. And I always done that all through my life. Every time I used to go through something, it was in the shower that I'd cry. I always found the water was my healing place. Any salt water, fresh water was my healing place. So when Rick was going through this depression, it was very challenging. I felt like I was a single mother, looking after my kids on my own, because Rick just totally withdrew himself from me and the kids. He detached himself, separated himself, go in the room and hardly talked. And sometimes I still see a bit of that today in him. If you see that, I think that all stems back from that the withdrawal. And I was on my own. I didn't have family. I come from far north Queensland. But having Rick's family and other Christian family members helped me through that. So when he was going through his depression, like he said, I'd take him his food and he wouldn't eat it. He'd withdraw into his shed at the back, and sometime in his room, he'd have to still try and prepare a message for church. So what I end up doing was, I thought I'll go and sit with him. So while he'd be at his office table organising his stuff, I'd go and I'd sit on the floor with the kids and just have my cup of tea, not say anything to him. And one thing I guess Rick did was he never closed his door to me and the kids when he was busy with his office stuff. His door was always left open to us. And with his kids, he always allowed them to come and sit and play around him while he was doing his work. He never hunted them out of the room. And that was a good thing, for us, that we could just go and sit on the floor and be with him but not say anything. So we went through that, and then when we went away to Port Stephens, to this house that we stayed in, so Rick had to work and then I had to look after the kids on my own. And I did feel alone, that there was no one, to help me there. But that's when his auntie and uncle came and rang and said, we want to come up there to be with you. So they came and stayed with us for a week, and that was really good for me. Now, I know you all believe in spiritual stuff, I had an experience in that house that night. A very heaviness came over me, and it took me outside. I had no control over it. It led me outside the house, and it's sort of like I was in this trance, and I walked out, and I knew I was going down to the water, but like something was drawing me out there, and I couldn't stop myself. But then when I sort of turned and I saw our bus, it's sort of like my eyes just opened up and I saw the bus, and I just ran in there and played some music really loud. It's sort of like this darkness just came over me, and it really scared the daylight out of me. But it's sort of like when you're at your lowest, things can happen to you when you're at your lowest, and I sometimes feel that when a person's tired, exhausted, emotionally exhausted, that's when you need to have self-care and look after yourself a bit more. And I was grateful that this old white lady, she came out and visited us. She knew Rick's family. She said to me, would you like to come to a Bible study? I said, yes, please. So while Rick was working, I went and joined this ladies group, and they looked after the kids while I was able to sit with them and just be with them. And sometimes when we'd go to church on the Sunday, I'd come out and Rick was gone, and I'd be left there with the kids. It's sort of like he just took off, and then I'd have to wait until he come back. And I remember his uncle said to me, he said, you don't have to put up with that. And I thought to myself, but Rick's not well, and he doesn't know what he's doing. And so he'd come back and pick me up, and then we'd go. That time made us or broke us. we wouldn't have been here today. We could have broke up as a family at that time. And I know Rick said, he said, I just feel like I just need to go. And I remember I had to put the hard word on him. And I said to him, I said, I want you to stop playing with those children. You're going to leave us. I said, don't you spend any more time with them, you go. And it sort of must have jolted him a bit. And then that's when, a few days later, that's when I saw him on the wharf diving off. It's sort of like this freedom came, and I think it came from a few words that you heard this guy say, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus. And I think that really spoke to you, because you said to me, I need to start giving thanks. And when Rick started being grateful and thankful for what he had, that's when he climbed up on that jetty, and I watched him. And I said, he's never done that ever. I've never seen him jump up, climb up that high. He's scared of heights. And he dived in the water, he got up again, and he was going again. And then I thought, he's free. Sort of like he's been set free. And that's when I told him, I said, Rick, I think you've come through this depression. I said, the way you was diving was water. He said, oh. He said, yeah. And I don't think he was aware of it. But it's very, very hard to be with somebody going through depression. Really hard. And a few people have asked me, how do you cope with looking after somebody who's going through depression? You've got to stay in there for the long haul. It's challenging. It's hard. You want to give up. You can, you could. But to help that person, you've got to hang in there right to the end. And that's why I think my own trauma made me strong to deal with the next trauma that came our way. So sometimes when we go through a trauma, that's our stepping stone for something else that will come along in your life. And, self-pity and guilt can take you down. My sister, she couldn't cope with our mother dying. She blamed herself. She died alcoholic. She blamed herself that Mum went shopping and didn't come back because I wanted a pair of shoes. She couldn't come to terms with her death, and I saw her self-destruct through alcoholism. And my brother's still the same today, just self-destructing through alcoholism. I was the youngest of the family, and I think being that age, in a way, was a blessing to me. They were older than me, so I think they saw more, the emotions, was more raw for them. When you're a child and you lose a parent at a young age, it's sort of like for a while there, your mind's just not there. You've got all your family, your community around you to support you. But it wasn't when I became a teenager that it hit me about what happened to Mum. Sort of like all of a sudden, and I felt lost. Sort of like I was this lost person, even though I had a big community that loved me, cared for me. And sometimes we can have a lot of people around us and family that love us, but you can still feel that you don't belong there. You can still feel that there's something else that you're looking for. And even though I got a big community and big family and I knew they loved me, there was a sense of I don't belong here no more because my mother's not here. But anyway, the drugs, the alcohol caused that self-destruction in my sister in particular. And I remember ringing her up and asking her, like why. She couldn't give me an answer why. But when you try, because people just say, how come you was able to come through it, having a faith is the only thing that brought me through. I had an old lady that was part of the stolen generation that taught me at a very young age what it means to be resilient. One of the old grannies was shot in the hips and taken to the community where I was born, and she used to walk with a limp, and I used to always wonder why she was like that. They shot her because she was trying to get away when she was about 8 years old, and the church raised my parents, my grandparents, didn't treat them good at all. A lot of them, treated badly. But I still saw this old granny still be able to sing the old hymns. So she taught me what it meant to be resilient, and she was able to overcome what the government did to her and what the church did to her. So I think, when people want to know how you overcome things, for me it's been a lot of things. It's been nature, it's been family, it's been my faith, friends. So it's not just one thing, it's a number of things that brings you through. But one thing is that we have to live our life the best that we can. Yep.
My grandfather's sister said something profound to me once that stuck with me right through the depression that I was going through. She said, when you're sick, you still should eat. And I thought, how stupid can that be? When you're sick, you don't feel like eating. But to turn that into a spiritual exercise, when you don't feel like reading the Bible, read the Bible. When you don't feel like praying, pray. And so that helped me right and true. And the other thing that helped me with depression is to be honest. Lord, I don't know what's happening here. It is very painful. It is very hurtful, and I don't know what's happening. And I can't get myself out of it. I can't work myself out of it. So I was trying to be honest as the best that I could be, and to give thanks through the process. Lord, I thank you what I'm going through. I don't understand it, but I thank you that you're with me and that you're helping me. And, Jesus, we sing that old hymn, what a friend we have in Jesus. And that's, to have a friend is what we all need. And to me, Jesus is my elder, one who will lead me through and guide me through whatever things that I go through. And every morning I'd get up and I'd read and I'd pray and I'd be honest with God. And I thought God was so unfair in what he was doing and the way that he was doing it. But, looking back, it was the best thing that I could ever possibly go through was depression. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's a difficult process to go through. But the lessons that I learned is to be honest, to be thankful, and to give thanks.
Don't go away yet. Thank you so much for that. As you were talking, a couple of things struck me. The number one thing was about our attitude of gratitude. Despite what we go through, there's a silver lining. Even as ugly as it is, there's always a silver lining. And Pastor Rick, you mentioned that what you've walked through can help someone else who's walked through something as well. And there's a proverb in the Bible, and it says that, I hope I get it right, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is the tree of life. So if we lose hope, that's when our heart is sick. That's when our spirit becomes sick. So we can't lose hope. And we've got to believe that there is something good even in the midst of all the trauma and the evil. And, I can definitely relate to your walks, both of you, where you just got to reach out to something, to someone, and in your case, reaching out to the Lord, and that certainly carried you through. And thank you so much for sharing that, because sometimes people don't know what to reach out to. And then that's when they reach out to the drugs, the alcohol, whatever can give them pleasure and numb the pain. But, if you're able to dig deep, connect with people, they can help you deal with and grasp onto something that will help you deal with the pain, rather than trying to seek a quick fix just to numb it out. But before you go, I want to ask you, we've got some questions that I think because of your life experience and what you've brought to Mount Druitt, we'd like to ask you two questions. One is, what is your vision of community healing? And I think you've touched on that when you've shared part of your testimony. And what do we need to bring this vision of community healing to life? Hand it back to you.
I was only thinking about this a couple of weeks ago. My vision for healing for Mount Druitt, because of my community where I'm from and further up north, and I know around New South Wales, is to have a healing water place somewhere around, around Darrick country. We used to help with youth group a few years back, and we used to take the kids to a lot of the rivers and the creeks around Mount Druitt, Parramatta, and a lot of the kids felt freedom when they was in water, even at Edmonton swimming pool. As soon as those kids was in the water, they'd want to talk to you, and tell you stories and just yarn to you about things. My vision is to have a place where we could go and just sit down, people have a swim, talk. Water just opens up people and makes you feel so much better. So that would be my vision for Mount Druitt, is to have a place to go to, a water place to go to, where you can just sit down, make a fire, and just have a yarn together.
Because we're connected to the church, that would be my healing centre, and to point people to the Lord, who is the greatest healer of all. And we ought not to think in terms of the physical, we need to think in terms of the spiritual and the eternal, because that's what we are as people, whether we are Indigenous or not. And so that would be my healing place. And I know, and I struggle with an Indigenous church. I think over the years that we've been shortchanged. I think the missionary work and denominationalism have done a huge disadvantage to Indigenous people on the whole. And I know even in community here, there are a lot of people who've got bad attitudes and vibes towards church, and I can fully understand that and fully appreciate that. But I'm from a Christian family. Goes back to my great-great-great-grandfather, who was a pastor for 50 years, and my dad is one of 15 children, and he's the first out of the family to become a Christian. And that's all because of my nan. I'm eternally grateful for my nan for keeping the faith torch burning in our family all these years. Because one of her brothers, younger brother, he would put his fist up to God and say, "You come down here, God, and I will literally smash you." And because of his arrogance and his ignorance, and mind you, they were children of missionary parents, he swallowed razor blades, tried to choke himself on razor blades, and God dealt with him. He ended up going blind, he went flabby, and then he ended up dying. And I had an uncle the same. They put their fists up to God and you say, "You come down here and I will smash you." And they passed away at a very young age. And so I know, I've taken a lot of funerals, and it concerns me that our people are dying without Christ and without hope. That really concerns me as a minister. And heaven is a real place, hell is a real place, and so I want all of our people here in Mount Druitt and family, to come to Jesus, and don't leave it too late. So that would be my healing place, would be the church.
Thank you very much. We, for far too long, I think we get caught up in the physical. When I say the physical realm of what we can see, what we can feel, what we can touch. But thinking about the eternal And our spirit, the well-being of our spirit, is probably a very good place to start in terms of our healing journey. And, you know, just with what you've shared with us today, your personal stories, you wouldn't wish depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts on your worst enemy. But walking through it and coming through the other side of it is certainly a light for someone else who could be in the midst of that darkness right now. So thank you very much. And please stick around, because we're going to just continue on with such a great day that we've had so far. And I think because we're being so personal with one another, this is building deeper connections, especially amongst the aunties and yourself that have shared your personal stories. And then with the conversations that have happened in the break and the fact that we've known each other one way or another, like, this is building stronger connections. And like I said before, it's not about services, it's not about funding, that stuff, that just separates the community, it divides the community. Coming together on a personal, spiritual level is so much more connecting. And, you know, today is like the launching pad of something wonderful and something new. So thank you very much, Pastor Rick and Kayleen. Yeah, can we just give them a warm thank you? And so I guess walking through trauma, but walking through your healing, it is a very personal experience. But not only that, it's also an experience that involves other people. So we walk through it personally, but people along the road help us and give us the hands up that we need rather than a hand out. And, you know, focusing on the spiritual side of things is so important. We cannot we can't get distracted by what we're seeing and what we're going through and feeling and talking about. It's just having that inner resolve. And that's where that resilience, your inner resolve is your resilience. And then when we're building up our spirits, that's the strength that we get to stand when we're walking through things.